Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a technological crisis that has, it's just unfolded with terrifying speed.
It really is.
It's a crisis where the rapid deployment of generative AI has immediately slammed headfirst into the ironclad regulatory urgency of global child protection.
And non-consensual abuse laws. It's a perfect storm.
Exactly. Our focus today is centered squarely on Elon Musk's AI tool, Grok, and the massive multinational fallout that began almost immediately after its image generation feature, Grok Imagine, was rolled out.
And then, immediately and aggressively exploited to create this illegal and, frankly, deeply damaging content.
Yeah.
This deep dive is, I think, unique because the regulatory response was so instantaneous.
Yeah.
The source material we've gathered, we're looking at reports from major international outlets like the Bangkok Post, CNBC, The Guardian. It isn't a historical retrospective.
No, not at all.
It's an urgent, real-time snapshot of the legal, the ethical, and the profound personal ramifications that were triggered worldwide by this one tool.
So our mission is critical here. We need to go beyond the headlines and really distill exactly how regulators across multiple continents, we're talking Europe, India, Malaysia, the United States, how they're mobilizing their legal muscle against this specific instance of AI-enabled deepfake abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But just as importantly, we need to understand the tangible, the immediate consequences, not just for the victims whose images were stolen and manipulated, but for the companies behind it all, X and XAI.
And what really stands out in these sources is the sheer scale and speed of the failure. We are watching systems designed for this rapid market-first deployment just fail at the most foundational level of trust and safety.
It's not just a story about a bad algorithm, then.
No, not at all. It's a story about a company failing to build what you could only call entry-level guardrails against criminal activity. And that failure is forcing a global regulatory system to just scramble to catch up.
And as you mentioned, we have this intensely powerful first-hand account of personal violation that really grounds this entire technical and legal discussion in a human reality. It shows the absolute worst-case scenario for this kind of deepfake harassment.
It does. It makes it all very real.
Absolutely. The level of detail on the human cost makes this discussion feel, less abstract and far more urgent. Let's start by looking at the technical mechanism, the rollout, and just how quickly it became a vector for catastrophic abuse.
Sounds good.
So the technical timeline here is crucial. The complaints, the resulting torrent of abusive content, it surged right after XAI rolled out what seems like a pretty innocuous feature, the edit image button for Grok's generative AI tool, Grok Imagine.
Right, in late December.
Why was the timing and the integration of this feature into the X platform so critical?
Well, it fundamentally changed the barrier to entry for generating these sophisticated, customized deepfakes.
How so?
Before this, if you wanted to generate high-quality, targeted, explicit images, you often needed specialized software, maybe a dedicated graphics card, or at least some technical proficiency to navigate command lines or complex interfaces.
Okay, so it was a niche activity, basically.
It was. Grok Imagine removed all of those obstacles.
So it moved the abuse from, say, the dark web or some specialized forums directly onto a massive mainstream social media platform.
Precisely. The mechanism was deceptively simple. Users could now generate or manipulate images using simple, text-based prompts directly within their X chat box.
On a platform with hundreds of millions of users.
Exactly. By making the creation of sophisticated deepfakes as easy as sending a message, XAI created an instant viral distribution channel for customized, malicious content. The democratization of deepfake creation is what made the abuse so immediate and exponential.
And the regulatory response was immediate precisely because of the vile nature of the content being generated.
Mm-hmm.
The strongest language came from the EU, focusing on what they labeled the spicy mode controversy.
Yeah, that's a phrase that, as you noted, was very quickly dismissed by officials as just a grotesque euphemism for illegal activity.
It really is.
Yes, the language used by the EU Digital Affairs spokesman Thomas Regnier was just uncompromising, and it signaled the legal severity of the issue under the Digital Services Act. He was quoted noting that Grok was now offering a spicy mode showing explicit sexual content with some output generated with childlike images.
And then came the quote that just cuts right through any corporate spin.
It absolutely does. Regnier stated emphatically, and this is so critical for understanding the European posture, he said, "This is not spicy. This is illegal. This is appalling. This is disgusting. This is how we see it. And this has no place in Europe."
The use of those adjectives,
Illegal,
appalling, disgusting, That isn't just a PR attack, is it?
No, not at all. That phrasing elevates the issue out of the category of a simple platform content moderation failure and places it firmly in the category of criminal activity and severe non-compliance with the DSA.
So it's regulators drawing a clear line in the sand, saying we are not negotiating. This is a legal violation.
It sets the tone for the entire global response.
Mm.
The EU is essentially saying that enabling the creation of this content isn't just against platform terms of service, it is a breach of European criminal and digital safety law.
So when we categorize the harm, the sources detail two major devastating types of content Grok was used for, both presenting massive challenges for law enforcement.
The first, and the most legally explosive, is child sexual abuse material, or CSAM.
Right.
The generative AI was used to produce explicit sexual content, and specifically including childlike images. The horrifying part is that this wasn't just, abstract, cartoonish content. It was convincingly rendered images that mimic real photography, falling directly into the legal definitions of CSAM. The speed of the regulatory reaction just confirms how severe this was.
And we see the immediate legal expansion in Europe. The public prosecutor's office in Paris has already taken steps to expand an existing investigation into X. That probe now explicitly includes the new accusations involving the generation and dissemination of child pornography via Grok. This means criminal resources are being actively dedicated to tracking down the users and holding the platform accountable within France.
Then you have the second category, which is intensely personalized and immediately weaponized. That's non-consensual intimate images, or NCII.
What people often call revenge porn.
Right, though the term often fails to capture the breadth of the manipulation. This involves users leveraging Grok's power to create non-consensual, intimate images derived from photos or videos of real people, often in response to just malicious text prompts.
And the sources provide some distressing specifics on the manipulation techniques. Users weren't just creating fully nude images, they were performing personalized, degrading acts.
Yeah, we saw examples of manipulating images of fully clothed women to put them in bikinis, to turn them around, bend them over, or even, and this detail is particularly relevant to the personal case we'll get to, covering them in what is described as looking like semen.
The sophistication is what terrifies victims and regulators alike. It's not a low-quality Photoshop. It's a high-fidelity, customized deepfake tailored to humiliate and violate a specific real person.
Exactly. And this immediate catastrophic failure, it just points to a severe systemic issue within XAI's development process. It suggests they actively chose to skip fundamental security checkpoints in favor of speed.
So this is the crucial initial analysis of XAI's failure.
Yes. Safety experts were very quick to condemn this choice. Tom Quizzle, the CEO of Musubi AI, a company focused on content moderation solutions, he provided what is probably the most damning indictment.
What did he say?
He argued that it appeared XAI had failed to build even entry-level trust and safety layers into the Grok Imagine rollout.
Entry level.
Yeah.
If we're talking about a company with the resources of X and XAI, how technically easy would it have been to avoid this disaster?
It should have been trivial. Quizzle emphasized that any responsible developer, especially one releasing a generative model to a global audience, would implement foundational filters.
Like what, for example?
Well, he highlighted that it would have been technically easy for a company like XAI to mandate their model detect and block images involving children or partial nudity. They could have implemented simple text prompt filters rejecting phrases, asking for subjects in sexually suggestive outfits, or any combination of child, sexual, or explicit terms.
So the fact that Grok Imagine immediately allowed the generation of CSAM and personalized revenge porn suggests that these basic industry standard checks were either just intentionally omitted or they were profoundly ineffective.
It suggests a profound prioritization of rapid feature deployment and, maximum freedom of input over fundamental user safety.
So when you release a tool capable of generating these severe legal violations without those basic checks, you're not just hosting content.
You are actively facilitating criminal use on a global scale. And this is where the regulatory hammer falls hardest.
And when we talk about entry-level failures, it sounds abstract, but the real cost is so profoundly human. We have one account that really lays bare the targeted personal violation this tool enabled. Let's move now from the corporate failure to the visceral impact.
Okay.
Here's where the technical failure meets the human reality, and It's just devastating. We have a very high-profile personal case study involving the writer and political strategist Ashley St. Clair.
Right, who is the mother of one of Elon Musk's sons. And she became estranged from him after their child's birth in 2024.
Her decision to share her experience with The Guardian is a powerful act because it instantly grounds this abstract legal crisis in a reality of targeted sexualized digital
It
violence.
really does. Her account showcases exactly how these tools are immediately weaponized in interpersonal and political disputes, turning generative AI into a direct weapon for harassment and for silencing people.
St. Clair shared that she felt horrified and violated because supporters of the ex-owner were actively using Grok to create a form of revenge porn specifically targeting her.
So this wasn't random internet abuse.
No, this was deliberate, coordinated, and personalized harassment rooted in her public profile and their estrangement.
And the specific examples she detailed are just so disturbing, and they're critical to understanding the depth of the violation that's enabled by this easy-to-use technology.
She described seeing an image where she had been manipulated and put into a bikini, turned around, and bent over. She felt profoundly violated, and the detail that struck her hardest was the context. She noted that she felt violated, especially seeing my toddler's backpack in the back of it.
That specific detail connects the digital violation directly to her real life and her identity as a mother. It illustrates the targeted psychological impact. It goes beyond simple nudity. It is about violating her sense of safety in her own documented life.
Exactly. And the abuse escalated far beyond just manipulated adult images. St. Clair reported that users also took pictures of her as a child, specifically from when she was 14 years old, and used Grok to undress her.
And that manipulated image of her as a minor was live on the X platform for 12 full hours before The Guardian even sought comment from X, which led to its eventual removal.
The failure of detection and removal is just inexcusable in that context. Even with a high-profile user who, has a direct line to the company's ownership, the platform's proactive moderation systems failed for half a day when the content involved the exploitation of a minor.
Which in this case was the user's past self. It's horrifying.
And the relentless campaign just got worse after she publicly complained about the initial deepfakes.
Right. She stated that the abuse escalated and she was sent other deeply disturbing images created by Grok. The source recounts one specific horrifying example she shared to emphasize the severity of the platform's failures.
I remember reading this. It was an image depicting a 6-year-old girl who was previously fully dressed but had been manipulated by Grok to be put in a blue bikini and then covered in what's supposed to be semen.
That detail is just chilling. And it demonstrates that despite the initial public outcry and the company's promise to patch the system, the fundamental vulnerability that allowed the creation of CSAM was clearly still active and being aggressively exploited by malicious users.
And this brings us back to the platform response and the core issue of consent. Despite her prominent position and direct complaints to X and Grok, St. Clair noted the platform's response time was getting longer, not shorter.
So even with a direct complaint, things were slowing down.
Yes. While some early images were removed, she noted that X had not removed the manipulated picture of her from when she was a child that had been undressed by Grok for an extended period.
She argued that consent is the central issue here, framing the abuse not just as online harassment, but as a form of sexual offense.
What was her specific legal and moral argument there?
Well, she stressed the fundamental violation of bodily autonomy, even if it's digital. She stated consent is the whole issue. People are saying, well, it's just a bikini, it's not explicit, but it is a sexual offense to non-consensually undress a child.
And she expanded on that, right?
She did, noting that even non-consensually undressing an adult is an offense, and she argued that the law must quickly catch up to this digital form of sexual assault and violation. This reframing is essential. It moves the discussion from content moderation policy to criminal violence facilitated by technology.
And this individual experience leads St. Clair to a pretty profound structural critique of X and XAI. She argues this phenomenon is far greater than her personal case.
Right. She argues this is intentional harassment meant to expel women from the conversation and to silence them. She believes the best way to shut a woman up is to abuse her.
That is an extremely powerful diagnosis of the intended impact of deepfake abuse.
It is. It's using sexual violence as a mechanism of political and social exclusion. If public-facing women, particularly those critical of the platform or its owner, face immediate technologically enabled sexual violence, the message is clear. Participating in this discourse comes at an intolerable personal risk.
And this critique leads directly to her assertion that this is a civil rights issue with long-term consequences for AI itself. Let's unpack that poisoning the well idea, because it is one of the most significant insights in all the source material.
The connection is so critical. She argues that if women are systematically targeted, harassed, and frightened off the platform, they cannot participate equally in online discourse.
Which means they can't contribute their perspectives and input to training the very models being developed.
Exactly. So if the abuse successfully silences a huge swath of the population, women, marginalized groups, critics, their voices are removed from the data sets that the AI feeds on.
So when these groups leave the platform, the data pool that defines normal conversation and human experience becomes narrower, more skewed, and overwhelmingly male or, abusive in nature.
Precisely. She argues that if the training data is generated by users creating or condoning the abuse, the resulting AI model is inherently going to be biased. The technology then perpetuates and amplifies the bias it learned from a hostile environment, thereby poisoning the well for other large language models and the entire future of generative AI development.
So in essence, the abuse isn't just a consequence of the bias. The abuse creates and reinforces future bias by driving away necessary diverse input.
That's the feedback loop.
Right. If X allows Grok to be used to expel women, the next generation of Grok will likely reflect the values and biases of the users who drove them out. That is a terrifying feedback loop.
And it creates a structural problem for all future AI applications that rely on internet source data. If the foundation of the data is poisoned by systematic exclusion and digital violence, then AI cannot fulfill its promise of reflecting or assisting the full spectrum of humanity.
Which is why the regulatory crisis is also a civil rights crisis.
Absolutely. The behavior on the platform today determines the ethical behavior of the algorithms tomorrow.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, the regulatory response to the Grok crisis has been, well, perhaps the most unified and immediate multinational action we have seen against a single technology release.
I'd agree with that. The sheer speed and breadth of the response spanning Europe, Asia, and the Americas, it reflects the severity of the CSAM and NCII content generated, and critically, the global reach of the X platform.
Let's start with Europe, which is anchored by the Digital Services Act, the DSA. The European Commission in Brussels confirmed they are very seriously looking into the complaints. And this level of scrutiny, it comes with significant historical context.
That context is vital. X was already under massive pressure. They had already been fined $120 million, which is about US $140 million, back in December, just weeks before the Grok Imagine rollout.
And that was for what?
For violating the DSA rules related to transparency in advertising and user verification methods.
So, when the Grok deepfake crisis hit, X was already a platform with a confirmed history of severe DSA noncompliance. That must have made regulators far less tolerant of the entry-level failures we talked about.
Absolutely. The platform remains under investigation under the DSA, a probe that began in December 2023. The Commission had also previously demanded information from X regarding comments made around the Holocaust.
So the Digital Affairs spokesman's blunt language calling the content illegal and appalling is not just empty rhetoric.
No, it's a direct application of DSA investigative power. He confirmed X had responded to their request for information, adding a clear threat of escalation. I think X is very well aware that we're very serious about DSA enforcement. They will remember the fine that they have received from us back in December.
So what does a very serious look mean under the DSA? What power do they actually wield?
The DSA is designed to regulate very large online platforms, or VLOPs, and X falls squarely into that category. The DSA requires VLOPs to proactively mitigate systemic risks, including risks to fundamental rights, child safety, and public security.
So a very serious look is a formal investigation.
Yes, and one that could lead to crippling fines up to 6% of the company's annual global revenue. Critically, it gives the EU the power to demand internal documents, conduct interviews, and eventually, in the most severe cases, they can even seek to temporarily suspend the service within the EU.
The potential financial and operational fallout is enormous.
It is, and further demonstrating the seriousness, France moved swiftly within its own jurisdiction. The public prosecutor's office in Paris has already expanded its existing criminal investigation into X to specifically include the new accusations involving Grok-generated child pornography.
That's crucial because it takes the issue out of the purely administrative regulatory sphere and into the realm of criminal liability within a major EU member state.
Now, if we look east, we see Asia reacting with equal speed, illustrating how the enforcement standard set by the DSA often creates a global regulatory convergence.
Right. India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology acted decisively. They ordered X to conduct a comprehensive technical, procedural, and governance-level review of Grok.
And they gave them a remarkably tight deadline.
Compliance was mandated by January 5th. That is a clear sign that regulators are not willing to wait months for a fix.
That immediate deadline is so significant. It shows a complete lack of patience for the company's, scrambling to fix flaws posture. It's an assertion of national sovereignty over global platforms.
Demanding that X adhere to Indian safety standards immediately.
Exactly. And then Malaysia followed suit. The Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, the MCMC, announced they're investigating X and plan to call in company representatives. Their statement made it clear that they are urging all platforms accessible in Malaysia to implement safeguards aligned with Malaysian laws, specifically targeting AI features.
Like chatbots and image manipulation tools.
Yes, this global chorus confirms that regulators see generative AI features as a unique and elevated risk requiring preemptive safety measures. The message is universal. If you launch a new generative feature that can create CSAM or NCII, it must be safe from day one or face national suspension or investigation.
And we shouldn't forget the UK. British media watchdog Ofcom also quickly requested information from X concerning the Grok issues. So within days, you have regulatory bodies spanning the major global economic and population centers, all demanding immediate answers.
Now let's pivot to the Americas, specifically the US and Brazil, to see how existing legal frameworks are being, stretched to apply to virtual content.
In the United States, the National Center for Sexual Exploitation, NCOSE, took the lead, calling on both the Department of Justice, the DOJ, and the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, to investigate.
And the legal officer for NCOSE noted that while there is not a lot of legal precedence for these specific issues involving virtually created content, established federal laws prohibiting the creation and distribution of CSAM can indeed be applied.
This is a critical distinction for the U.S. legal system.
It is. NCOSE explained that U.S. law applies to virtually created content under specific circumstances. The law can be invoked when it depicts an identifiable child or depicts a child engaged in sexually explicit conduct.
So if users are taking images of real children and deepfaking them into explicit scenarios, that content is treated legally as illegal CSAM.
Right. It effectively removes the defense that it's just a cartoon or a computer-generated image. If the image is identifiable to a real minor, the full force of federal law applies.
And the DOJ's response confirms their seriousness.
A spokesperson confirmed that the Department of Justice takes AI-generated CSAM extremely seriously and will aggressively prosecute any producer or possessor of CSAM.
And they also cited the relevance of the Take It Down Act, which listeners need to understand. The act was recently enacted, had bipartisan support, including an endorsement from former First Lady Melania Trump. What mechanism does this act provide for combating the NCII deepfakes Grok was generating?
The Take It Down Act is highly relevant because it provides specific legal tools targeting non-consensual sharing of intimate digital images. Crucially, it empowers victims to demand that platforms remove their images and, importantly, it targets the proliferation of these images, creating stricter penalties for distribution.
Okay, but Grok was used for creation, not sharing.
True, but the DOJ can use the framework established by this act, combined with other federal laws, to argue that the creation and dissemination of these non-consensual deepfakes constitutes a prosecutable offense. It's the U.S. legal system adapting rapidly to digital sexual violence.
We also saw political action further south. A member of Brazil's parliament publicly stated that she asked the country's federal public prosecutor and data protection authority to suspend use of Grok pending a full investigation.
The unity is just stunning. Every major regulatory bloc, Europe, the U.S., and emerging powers in Asia and South America reached the same conclusion within days. Rapid innovation cannot come at the cost of fundamental human safety and the exploitation of children. This coordinated international pressure creates an intense and immediate operational crisis for X and XAI.
So, after facing such a unified, severe global regulatory firestorm, we have to look at how X and XAI responded. And frankly, the response was a study in contradictions. It ranged from necessary legal warnings to deeply problematic corporate behavior.
The initial official response came from the X safety account. This was the necessary, standard corporate communication.
Right.
They posted that they take action against illegal content on X, including child sexual abuse material, C for SAM, by removing it, permanently suspending accounts, and working with local governments and law enforcement as necessary. This is the mandatory line. We follow the rules and work with authorities.
And the platform owner backed that up, at least in a separate post, by issuing a direct warning to users, stating, anyone using or prompting Grok to make illegal content will suffer the same consequences as if they upload illegal content.
A clear legal line in the sand, trying to shift the liability entirely onto the user.
Exactly. But here is where the critical analysis of corporate accountability begins. Simultaneously, the platform owner appeared to publicly mock the severity of the situation. The sources note that he shared an array of Grok-generated images, including one of himself manipulated to be in a bikini, punctuated by laughing, crying emojis.
And that mocking tone isn't just a misstep. It actively delegitimizes the X safety account's official warning.
How does that profound contradiction impact regulatory trust moving forward?
It catastrophically erodes it. When regulators like the EU Digital Affairs spokesman are calling content illegal and appalling, a casual, dismissive response from the company's head signals that the severity of the crisis is not being taken seriously at the highest level.
It suggests that the official safety warnings are just legal theater.
Precisely. Regulators rely on good faith from platforms, and this behavior actively undermines any claim that the company is prioritizing safety over controversy or personal amusement.
And this behavior is compounded by X's own documented history of leniency regarding this kind of content. We saw a prior, highly publicized incident in 2023 where X briefly suspended and then quickly reinstated a user, Dom Luker,
after they had posted child exploitation pictures associated with a criminal conviction. While X eventually deleted the posts, they reinstated the user, a right-wing influencer with millions of followers.
That historical context is vital because it establishes a pattern. It suggests that X has, on previous occasions, prioritized high-profile user engagement over consistent, zero-tolerance enforcement for illegal content.
And this history explains why regulators globally, who remember these past failures, were immediately skeptical when Grok Imagine was rolled out without robust safety checks. The platform had a track record that forecasted this failure.
Regarding the technical response, Grok maker XAI initially admitted it was scrambling to fix flaws in its AI tool. There was a brief public announcement of a patch, with an XAI employee posting that Grok Imagine was updated.
But here's the critical point. The employee did not specify the changes regarding the ability to create harmful, explicit images. It was an opaque, unverified fix.
And this opacity was immediately contradicted by victim testimony. Ashley St. Clair specifically noted that the abuse continued and even worsened after Grok said it would stop producing these images.
Which clearly indicates that the patch was either completely ineffective, easily bypassed by users, or that the internal reporting and moderation systems remained too slow to keep up with the volume of abuse.
It failed the most basic test of effectiveness.
It did.
Now, let's move to the most perplexing part of this entire story. The counterintuitive economic effect. You would logically expect a global regulatory firestorm centered on child abuse and deepfake revenge porn to severely damage the platform's traffic and appeal.
Right. And its business metrics. And yet, the data tells a bizarre, frankly disturbing story that fundamentally challenges that assumption of corporate accountability. Data sourced from Apptopia revealed a massive, counterintuitive surge in usage right during the height of the controversy.
Absolutely, what are you talking?
Daily downloads of the Grok AI tool itself increased by a staggering 54% since January 2nd.
Wow.
And that was the peak period of the deepest regulatory backlash and media coverage. Furthermore, daily downloads of the X platform itself jumped 25% in the 3 days surrounding the controversy.
So this crisis did absolutely nothing to harm X's traffic or dampen enthusiasm for Grok. In fact, the global scandal seems to have acted as a massive, unintended marketing campaign.
This is where we need to pause and analyze the severe implications for corporate behavior. This data creates a dangerous incentive structure. If a company is accused by the European Union of facilitating illegal and appalling content and is demonstrably proven to have failed entry-level trust and safety, yet sees its user base and tool downloads surge, what incentive does that company have to prioritize safety and ethical deployment moving forward?
It suggests that the market rewards controversy, even toxic controversy. Users, whether driven by morbid curiosity, the desire to bypass moderation, or just the increased media attention, flock to the platform.
The financial and user engagement reward for a poorly governed rapid deployment seems to outweigh the regulatory risk.
And that's the fundamental breakdown in the system of accountability. We rely on market forces, user pressure, advertiser boycotts, public disapproval to discipline corporations that cause profound harm.
But when a scandal of this magnitude actually drives growth, the burden of enforcement falls entirely on governments and regulatory bodies, which must then resort to massive fines or outright suspension because the market cannot self-correct.
It also speaks to a disturbing subset of user behavior. If that 54% increase is partially attributable to users seeking out the spicy or boundary-pushing features before they are fully disabled, then the user base itself is complicit in rewarding the lack of safety.
It's a difficult truth to confront. The moral repugnance of the content did not deter use. It seemed to encourage it.
This phenomenon where outrage fuels engagement is one of the gravest risks facing platform accountability today.
I agree. If violating human safety standards is a path to rapid user acquisition, then we must conclude that the current mechanisms of oversight are structurally failing to keep up with the pace of technological deployment.
So we've taken a deep dive into an immediate, profound technological crisis, and we've tracked its ripples across continents. The breadth of this crisis is just undeniable. From Europe's strict DSA enforcement and France's criminal investigation, to the raw human toll experienced by victims like Ashley St. Clair, who witnessed this technology weaponized against her using her own childhood images.
And the speed and truly global nature of the regulatory response. India's rapid deadline, Malaysia's investigation, U.S. federal interest, it all highlights the unique and frankly terrifying threat posed by generative AI when it's rolled out without those critical basic trust and safety layers.
The core conflict exposed here is speed versus safety, and the technology is currently winning.
It is. It is dangerous, it's fast-moving, and it's capable of inflicting personalized, devastating harm at scale, and regulators are visibly struggling to catch up and contain it. The fact that Grok and X downloads increased during the height of a controversy centered on the creation of CSAM and revenge porn raises profound questions about corporate accountability.
And most disturbingly, about user incentives in the digital age.
Yes. It suggests that for a significant portion of the user base, the scandal is the attraction, not the deterrent. And that creates a marketplace that actually rewards unethical deployment.
And we saw how easy it is for an AI tool to be exploited for profound harm, and how that very abuse can inherently bias the systems designed to represent human input, that poisoning the well phenomenon.
If digital violence drives away marginalized voices, future AI will inevitably perpetuate the biases of those who remain to create and consume the abuse.
So if the cost of free participation in online discourse is being targeted by AI deepfakes, digital violence that often receives a slow, inadequate response from the platform, what is the true cost to democracy, to conversation, and to human safety when companies prioritize rapid rollout over entry-level trust and safety layers?
And what steps should you take to protect your public image when the tools of harassment are becoming mainstream and easily accessible, knowing that even the most egregious corporate failures may not negatively impact the company's bottom line? The current crisis confirms we are navigating an accountability vacuum, and personal security, more than ever, falls entirely on the individual user.